Morning, everybody. Welcome to the Celestial Offering presentation. Hope everybody's had a great week. We've had a nice week here. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this week at the shop yet. We'll first start off going down the Celestial Offering path because there's a lot to talk about. And then if we have time at the end, we'll talk a little bit about some of the interesting things that have gone on here at the shop. So, Celestial Offering, what is this thing? It's a fully fermented tea, which the Chinese call heicha, and everybody's done this juggling with translation. Let me not juggle. Heicha directly translates as black tea. You see things like dark tea, all sorts of translations. The correct translation is black tea. And all of this got confused because Europeans started calling red tea black tea, which in fact it isn't. So let's go through what makes a tea truly black. And then let's answer a key question about black tea and puerh tea. Oh, I used a new term, P-U-E-R. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute too. So what is black tea? According to the way the Chinese define, it is fermented tea. So the chief process in black tea is fermentation. And fermentation is driven by microbial agents, including bacteria, fungi, yeast, and molds. All of those things go in, especially during the early years of the fermentation process. Red tea, as a reminder, is primarily oxidized. So that's a chemical reaction. It's not a microbial reaction. Therefore, the taste profiles are completely different. Red tea, okay, hints of sweetness, hints of honey, hints of fruit, slightly floral, slightly spicy, slightly chocolatey, sometimes that pure tea taste. For black tea, if it is a puerh, and again, we'll talk about the definition of puerh in a minute. It's going to be some form of earthy, loamy, woodsy. It can have other high tones, hints of caramel. It can have some other high tones in addition to that. It can also have low tones. So bad quality, low tones, smelly sock, very ammonia, sense of ammonia coming out of the tea. That's bad. That's bad. And I'll talk about why that happens because there is some of that on the market. And there's a specific cause for the most part of what makes it that way. All right, so let's talk puerh for a minute because Celestial Offering is a puerh tea. So puerh refers to the process that's used to create a fermented tea in Yunnan province. That's what puerh really refers to. And that name was taken from the area where this process really developed. So the area at one time is Puerh County, you had Puerh City. Today you still have Puerh City. Puerh City has moved around. Sometimes one city will be called Puerh City and then historically it changes in another city. But it's from Yunnan and it's from really southern Yunnan. So within, generally speaking, about 100, maybe 150 miles of the border of Yunnan, the southern border. So Yunnan and Vietnam, Yunnan and Laos, Yunnan and Cambodia. And so they had a specific process to create what they call puerh tea. Now, why am I going on about this? Because I want to remind everybody that there are other black teas in China as well. So again, what's the quality which makes it belong to black tea? It is fermented. And where are these other fermented teas? You've had some before, those of you who've been to the shop or been with us for a long time, but some of them come from Guangxi, some of them come from Hunan, which is more central China. Guangxi is still south. The taste profiles are different. The ones from Hunan are very different than the ones from Guangxi, and those are somewhat different than the ones from Yunnan. But the thing that's all the same is that they're fermented. Now, the marketeers in Yunnan have tried to separate puerh as a separate category. Probably not a good idea, because really what drives the recognition of puerh is the fermentation process. All right, I need to do a little bit more explanation, and I need to use some Chinese words. Oh, yuck. That means we all have to pay attention. I'll make it short. You have shengpu and you have shoupu. So shengpu, S-H-E-N-G, space, sometimes no space, P-U. That is raw black. So on the boards here, you'll see that as raw black or uncooked black. There's all sorts of terms that are used, but usually those two are recognizable. And some people just say shengpu. Shoupu, or some people say shupu, because there are two different spellings, S-H-O-U space P-U, sometimes S-H-U space P-U. All the same meaning. It's black puerh tea, fermented tea. And so celestial offering belongs to that category. So what else is special about celestial offering? Well, let's see. Let me look in my head and see if I can, oh, it's loose leaf. So many of the shoupus or fully fermented black teas come in cakes. The cakes are either 357 grams, some are 400. Sometimes instead of a cake, it comes as a brick. You have all sorts, and sometimes it's just a small compressed tea, single serving. You have all sorts of formats for that, but it all belongs to fully fermented. So, you know what? While we talk about the process, let's go ahead and get started in terms of the brewing. So as usual, Tea Master will brew first, and then she'll brew with you. So I'm going to ask the Tea Master to come on over, and we'll watch her brew Celestial Offering. So without further ado, the Tea Master.
Hi, everybody. 大家你们好 Yeah. This is the puerh tea. Chinese call 熟普。我今天做熟普 I do fermented tea. Yeah. It's 熟普 fermented tea. Not regular, not 生普。熟普 Yeah. Okay. So I do. Yeah. John.
So you see the platform.
Yeah.
On which she works. So she's got a tray, 2 cups. Whoops, I shouldn't rearrange her format of those cups, and a strainer. And so this tea is done at 200 degrees. And therefore, you're going to see some moves here that you don't normally see. So it's 200 degrees and it's not covered and it's in glass. So that's the first thing we have to talk about, because you see people in some places, oh, they have a Ishin clay pot and they're doing the puerh, the fully fermented in a pot. And really, if you go to Yunnan, you don't see people doing that. You see people using ceramic. They're not using a clay pot. They're generally not using a glass. And why again? Because ceramic leaves a nice smell. In other words, you can detect the smell much easier than with glass. Doing the Ishin pot is something that's arisen outside of Yunnan. They're not really doing that in Yunnan. And again, from our perspective, I don't care what you use. However, what I will tell you is that you've spent a lot of money on a clay pot, and if you use it for puerh, you can't use it for anything else. And why would you do that? Why in the world would you do that when you can get a very superior flavor from 2 glasses? And by the way, this is brewed uncovered. So there's for Westerners, sometimes they get confused because they see different models of performance. And again, I don't care which model of equipment that you use. This, though, produces a fine flavor. This is the most economical, and this is what we recommend. All right, the tea master is washing out each of the glasses. They're clean already, but we're making sure there's no leftover residue of any soaps, spots, or anything in there that doesn't belong. So she's washed it out with 200-degree water. You see the leaves. She's heating the leaves because she's waking them up. Shakes them. And it looks like she's using a smaller container to put some water in. What's that about? Let's see what she does.
洗茶.
So there's this term called 洗茶, which literally means washing the tea. So I ask you this, is this tea inherently dirty? Why aren't we washing the other teas? The answer is no. 洗茶literally means washing, but in this case, rinsing is probably a better translation of it. So it's part of the wake-up process, and just in case, because this is fermented, there are any bacteria or anything else that's snuck in here, 200-degree temperature of washing or rinsing the tea will get rid of undesirables. All right, she sets the timer for 3 minutes. And we'll continue on the process. Yes.
One question about timing and current. The timing on the steeping is a little different in your email than it is on the website. I had sent out what was on the website. Which one should folks go by? So the timing in your email instruction says first steep is 3 minutes. That's the same as the website. Second step, steep 2 minutes. Third steep 2 minutes. There's just a few extra seconds, like 30 more seconds in some of the website steeps. Website correction needed, perhaps?
我们的网站是说3分1分半，第二1分半以上。但是我发是322。
这是正常。So the leaves at home for everybody.
他们应该用这个。
跟着我这个就是说，跟着either吧，说2分2分，跟你今天做的一个不一样。
Okay, yeah, use what I set out, the 2 minute, 2 minute. We'll review the website, but we always do these teas before the sessions, the day before, and we figure out what the best taste is. And sometimes you're right, that's not consistent with the website. You know what that is. And we hate those 2 words, but here they come again, understudy error. And this time the understudy error is on the website, not in what I sent you in the email. So thank you for catching that. All right, so we're going through the processing of this, and we're trying to understand what's the difference between fully fermented and in quotes raw black. Well, they go through the first same 4 or 5 steps identically. You pick the tea, and in this case, it's usually down to the 3rd or 4th leaf. You wither the tea when you get it back to the farm. And by the way, most of this is done at the farm. It isn't going to a big production facility. Most of the tea for the fully fermented goes to a first stop, which is usually the farm, and then they get it into the so-called unfinished tea, the 70%. I really don't like the term unfinished, but it implies something, and you'll see what in a minute. I much prefer the 70% tea. So you wither. This withering is very important because you got to get the moisture out of the tea leaves. And these are enormous tea leaves. These are big. This is Yunnan. Everything is big. Okay, timer is done. And what the tea master is going to do is separate the tea liquor from the tea leaves. Not in a big hurry, deliberate, careful, not trying to make a bunch of bubbles, not pouring from on high, just trying to get all of that in there. Oh, and you know she's trying to get every last drop in there. What's the reason for trying to get every last drop again? Because if you leave water in there, it'll continue to steep. And you don't want that. You want to be able to have steep after steep with this. And you want it to taste good. So look at this beautiful color. This thing is unbelievable. So remembering, of course, that this is 200 degrees, we have to use caution. This is not like the 170 or the 175 where you can take a substantial sip. This is the inhalation. You're taking a very tiny sip. So the first thing you're doing, of course, is you look at the leaves and get some sensibility of what it is you're working with. And you looked at them already, but you look at them when they're wet. Okay, you get a sensibility of what this might taste like. Remember, we smell the leaves because our nose organs are connected to our taste organs. So it's important to set the stage. Smell the tea, and then the 200-degree inhalation. Okay, so remember, why are we doing this? We're entering the quality arena. What we're trying to do is ascertain the quality elements of this. So what sorts of things are we looking for? We're looking for how it reacts on the mouth. Where is your tongue feeling this tea? Where in the roof is the roof of your mouth feeling this tea? Is it feeling the dryness? Then when we swirl it around and swallow it, we're trying to get a sense of the aftertaste. What is left in your mouth? What sort of taste are you perceiving? Then you're thinking about energetics. Okay, energetics means a different thing to all of us, doesn't it? It means how are you feeling after drinking? So all of us are going to have a different impression after we drink this, and you just take note of that impression because for me already, for example, I'm feeling a warmth. That's me. You may not feel that warmth right away. You may feel it after a bit of time, or you may not feel it at all. You may feel it in a different location. I'm feeling it all over. All right, and I'm taking a second sip to verify and consolidate what my initial impressions are. So after we've ascertained the quality about this tea, then we start to think about aroma and taste. So remember, it's those quality elements. You're looking for mellowness, smoothness, aftertaste, energetics. That's mouthfeel. And then afterwards, you start to do the other things. Quality first, taste and aroma second. All right, so it's your turn to brew. I remind you again, this is 200 degrees, so be careful when you sip this. All right.
So raw black means either fully fermented or not fully fermented?
The questioner says, your explanation was confusing. I'm not sure whether raw black means both fermented and non-fermented. What does raw black mean? So raw black is the start of the fermentation journey. And what's meant by that is nothing has gone on except, and we'll get to the step where it cuts off, except to get the leaves ready for their next 30 to 70 years. So I'll explain that once we get to that last step. Raw black is much closer to green. In fact, you could argue that the minute it's finished processing, it really is a green tea on the way to becoming a fermented tea. So raw black is never, ever fully fermented until 30 to 70 years afterwards. And I ask you this, do you think a 30 to 70-year-old raw black would taste the same as a fully fermented black that's done in 45 to 60 days? The answer is no, it won't. But they'll both be fully fermented. All right, so you're, again, brewing along with the tea master here. And you're heating up the leaves. And you're drawing and getting ready your 200-degree water. So remember, the first step of this is going to be to rinse the leaves. And the rinse will be anywhere from 20 to 30 seconds. And it's funny, if you ask us, do they always rinse in Yunnan? The answer is no. But here, it's become the custom to do that. There's a study or two out in Britain which says, well, you ought to rinse the leaves because, again, there might be bacteria which sneaks in that's not supposed to be there. Chinese don't necessarily believe that, but even in some places in China, they regularly rinse. So we rinse just because everybody else does. It's a nice safety issue, but it's not implying that the tea is dirty. You see she's rinsed, puts it in the receptacle cup, and then pours that out. You do not drink that, you pour that out. So you have put the water in, you have pressed the timer, you've set it for 3 minutes, and now we'll finish up the process. So again, we're still in this initial process that both raw black and fully fermented go through. Everybody has to go through the 70% tea, no exceptions. So we pick down to the 3rd or 4th leaf, we withered. Where are we withering? Well, it depends. If it's raining, we're clearly withering indoors. But the ideal is always to wither outdoors. That's the speciality of teas produced in Yunnan, particularly the raw black and the fully fermented. Always wither outdoor when possible. And we'll get to the reason why in a minute. After withering, and the withering is different by varietal, it's different by farm. The leaves are all different sizes. You've got smaller, you've got medium, and you've got very large, depending on where the farmer has gotten the leaves. You then fry. That's the same as green tea. You're frying. What's the difference? Green tea, you fry at a much higher temperature, 300-400 degrees. The puerh always is fried at a significantly lower temperature, somewhere between 200, 250, and it's also done for a shorter amount of time. We'll get to the reason for that in a minute. Next step, and this is a critical step, is you roll the leaves. There are some machines that do that, but for the most part, when you're getting crafted tea, most of the time that's a hand roll. And the hand roll can be from anywhere from 45 minutes to 90 minutes. So again, depends on the leaves, the size, and the skill of the rollers. Last step, you actually then dry the leaves. Oh, wait a minute, I left off part of dry. You sun dry the leaves. All right, so let's go back all the way to this issue of sun drying. Why are you sun drying as opposed to applying more heat or doing it indoors? Because you're trying to preserve any of the bacteria or the yeast or the fungi that are going to be used in the process of fermentation. And that's why you fry at a lower temperature, because at a lower temperature, these microorganisms don't die. They go into stasis. They're not dead, but you can't create any reaction. All right, your timer's gone off. Carefully separate the tea from the tea liquor. And you notice that the tea master actually uses all sorts of motions consistent almost with a small cup modality, even though we're doing large cup. Okay. All right. So we have, let's go through the steps again. You smell, and then you determine quality. So remember, this is a 200-degree inhalation. You roll it around your mouth. You think about aftertaste. What's your mouth feeling like right now? And then if there's any energetics observations, you start taking those. So take a couple minutes to do that. I'll continue the explanation of the process. So these microorganisms are in stasis when they're fried. And then afterwards, and by the way, why are they frying at all? They're frying in order to not allow the leaf to really start oxidizing. That's the real reason they're frying, but not hot enough to kill the microorganisms. This is exactly why after rolling, you sun dry, because in the sun, the microorganisms come to life. And the microorganisms are responsible for fermenting the tea. And if you're going to do it naturally and not artificially, it's going to take 30 to 70 years to fully ferment the tea. If you're going to do it artificially, it'll take 45 to 60 days, almost like a composting process, to make it fully fermented. And that's the so-called shoupu. And the shoupu stops after you start putting it back in the sun again, and it gets these microorganisms woken up. So let me make that real clear. When we say raw black, it hasn't undergone artificial composting processing. It's going to undergo a natural process where nothing further is done except to store it properly and then to enjoy when you're ready to enjoy it. And by the way, this is a choice of the consumer. Many consumers like to drink raw black right away. They like that flavor, and they like seeing the difference in flavor. Raw black undergoes one more process, but it's not really a process related so much to flavor as it is to storage. So it's compressed and made into some sort of cake or brick, or it's left loose leaf. And we have both here. Yes?
This tea is so viscous.
Tea is extremely viscous, is the commentator. And absolutely. And it kind of just lingers on the tongue, and there's no confusion about that. This isn't, unlike radiance. Remember when we had radiance where that went in and it didn't have that same viscousness? This is thick, this is viscous. Yes.
The liquor has this earthy aroma. The swallow is very smooth. For me, it's bright, it's light, with an emerging hint of dryness on the side of the tongue. Juicy, satisfying.
Earthy aroma, bright, light, smooth, juiciness, a little hint on the sides of the tongue of dryness. That's a great description. And why we like this one so much comes from the last part of your description. And you nailed it, juicy. Whoever usually uses that term to describe a tea, but this does have that juiciness, starts with the earthiness, ends with the juiciness. This is easy to drink. And you have no interference. All right, what does no interference mean? Some of the fully fermented teas are stored poorly. And you have some purveyors who claim, oh yeah, that moldy smell, that old shoe smell, yeah, that's what people really love. Well, let me tell you who really loves that so you're clear. Some people in Canton, some people in Hong Kong, and some people in Southeast Asia like that smell. And they store it in a wet place on purpose. And actually what they're really trying to do. So let's look in their heads and see what they're really trying to do. They're trying to usually get a more mellow taste. So they're trying to age it quicker. And what you end up with is bad result. And in Yunnan, do they ever accept taste like a shoe, moldy, a sock? The answer is no, never. Yes.
The warm leaves smell like warm carrots and vegetable smell. I can smell the soil.
I love this comment and I love this comparison. The warm leaves smell like carrots. And you hit me on the right day because I made carrots for myself yesterday and I steamed them. And you're right, I can sense right exactly what you're getting at with this.
Scent of the steep leaves is bright and earthy, but the scent of the tea liquor has more hint of mushroom. Makes me feel like I'm in a forest hunting for chanterelles. Tea wipes away the battles of the week and opens up possibilities of the weekend.
This is a great and interesting comment. So the smell of the tea leaves is bright and earthy versus the smell of the tea liquor, which has hints of mushroom. It's definitely of the forest is what this commentator is indicating. And it brings a sense of, what was that sense? A sense of
feeling like you're in the forest hunting for mushrooms, hunting for chanterelles.
It's as if you're in the forest hunting for mushrooms, for chanterelles. Love this comment because it doesn't get away from anything that you said, all of you have said before. There's still that carrot smell. Remember, carrot is a root, so you got that earth from that. It certainly is bright. It certainly is earthy, and it places you in the forest. The key element of this is there is nothing harsh about this at all. This is inviting. And whether you like this taste or not is a different judgment. It may be possible because not everybody enjoys earthiness, and that's okay. But you all can validate that this is a quality tea. Whether this is the one you have tomorrow morning, that's a different story. Yes?
In addition to the pronounced earthiness, the wet leaves had hints of spiciness. The initial flavor also was much smoother than I had expected from the aroma.
So in addition to earthiness, this commentator picks up hints of spiciness, and this colored the commentator's predisposition towards this tea, thinking that this might not be as smooth as it really is, thinking that there might be a little bite to this. And the commentator emphasized, hey, this is really smooth. And there's a difference from what's going on with the leaves.
One commentator knew that he shouldn't have started with his durian.
So
giving hints of what is that, petrichor?
So one commentator, I'm wondering who this commentator is, but I think I know. One commentator is indicating he probably shouldn't have stored it with his durian. Now, for those of you who don't know what durian is, it is a fruit from Southeast Asia that is extremely potent and not in a nice way. However, for those of you who've eaten durian, if you can survive the semi-rotting smell of it and actually get it open and taste the fruit is delicious. And therefore, hence my laughing at what this commentator is indicating. Yes?
On energetics, it's like finding a warm, sunny spot in the middle of a morning forest walk.
On energetics, like finding a warm, sunny spot in the middle of a morning walk. I like this energetic comment because this, to me, suggests some activity. There's internal warmth that's coming from the walk, and you're in a sunny spot, so the warmth is all over. And I really get that. I got it right from the beginning of the sip of this. And by the way, from an herbal perspective, the energetics, and by the way, when I say herbal, I mean Chinese herbal perspective, the energetics of this are warming. So the Chinese herbalists will tell you that this is a warming tea. And Chinese herbalists will tell you a lot of different things about this tea because there's a lot of thoughts about how this may help the body. The Chinese scientists, the herbalist, medical industry is all looking really, really hard at this type of tea. First off, it has naturally occurring statins, lovastatin, that type of statin. not in great quantities, but in trace quantities. Second off, there is a lot of theobromine in this, and a lot of research is being done on theobromine and having to do with its good effect on each of your organs. And this is a weird type of research, and so I need to explain this slightly more. And remember, this is not me talking. I'm just parroting what we've learned over the last few years.
Theobromine, you said?
Bronin, sorry.
Bronin.
Yes. And that is apparently each of our organs, and this is probably really a Chinese herbalist type of perception, has its own metabolism. Well, this so-called theobromine helps each of the organs operate at optimal metabolism levels. I don't understand this. I'm just telling you what they're talking about. This is certainly one of the things that they're researching. It has all the other things that you might expect a darker colored tea, although in lesser quantities, some of them. So theobromine, theoflavin, theorubicins, it has some of that, but it's not the same quantities as with the red teas. So they're looking at this from a bunch of different angles, doing a bunch of different tests with this. And we just need to keep our eyes open in terms of what research comes from what they're doing. And this research, by the way, some of it's being sponsored by the National Academy of Sciences in China. So a lot of attention on what appears to be perceived health benefits. And remembering, the Chinese perspective is so different from the Western perspective, right? For the Western perspective, when you're sick, what do? You go to the cabinet, you take out a pill, and that relieves the symptoms. The Chinese herbalist perspective, let's look at you. Let's look at the whole organic you, and let's try and figure out what the cause of this is, and let's try to solve the root cause rather than the symptom. So at different starting points, but both are valuable, obviously, in terms of treating a variety of issues. And that's why I brought this up today. Yes?
Traditional Chinese medicine, what would this tea be good for?
From a traditional Chinese medicine view, there's a couple things it's very obviously good for. And the first is indigestion. So if you're having indigestion, especially because of overeating or eating too fatty foods, then this is supposed to help speed everything along, and it's also supposed to help bring relief to that area. That's a very obvious thing that it's, or attribute that it's good for. It's talked about from Chinese medicine point of view for helping with blood pressure. It's talked about a lot of things related to the heart. But you know what? I haven't seen studies, comprehensive studies, that we as Westerners and as scientists would look at and say, okay, this for sure does this. The key thing is it's less researched in many ways outside of China than, say, green tea and white tea. The two most researched teas outside of China are the green tea and the white tea. Green tea because of the catechins, right? The white tea because of all the uses in cosmetics. So those two have tremendous bodies of research. And now, by the way, they're starting to cross over because the white tea was just, really looked at for cosmetics. Now they're finding that there's some other potential benefits. In China, there have been lots of claims about this in the South, And scientists in China are looking at this a lot, fewer in the West.
Jeremy also knows there's a lot of literature on theaflavins in black teas impacting intestinal issues.
Yes, there is a lot of, Jeremy noted that there is a lot of literature about theaflavins impacting gastric juices. There's, theaflavins seem to do a lot, and they seem to have a lot of they have a lot of research done on them, and we know a lot about them. The other compounds, we don't know enough. The theorubicins is a wide open area of research. The theobronins, also a wide open area of research, which more is being currently carried out. And over the next few years, we're going to see more information related to both of them.
What's the origin of the actual color of the tea? What we see, not in the processing name, but we see so much variation in color and intensity in these types of teas.
This is a great question. So the questioner asked, why is it that we see such great variety in the color of these teas? And I believe that the questioner is referring to the fully fermented teas, because you do see tremendous variation from pitch black. Sometimes you can go into a restaurant and they'll pour this stuff, and it's just like they grabbed earth from outside, mixed it with a little water, and poured it in your cup. And then sometimes we have some here where the color is significantly lighter than Celestial Offering. So why is there this range of colors? And is there any specific thing that we can point to identify how to predict that? And so the answer is I don't know. I don't know of any specific predictor of color. I've never thought about it that way. And I think that if I went back and asked Chinese scientists, they would probably say, based on the varietal and probably based on the skill of putting together the processed tea, you will have some predictability in the color, is what I would guess they would say. I'll have to think about this and ask the question. Yes.
Do you know what impact on what theobronins impact in terms of different levels in the body? Certainly, an article that a tea viewer dropped in talks a little bit about the impact on, again, on bile and on the gut. Any idea what that kind of component does for your body's levels is what an asker.
Okay, great question. And the answer is I don't know. The questioner says or asks, what specifically, or do I have knowledge of theobronin in terms of its specific interaction with microbiota or any other function of the body? And I really don't. And I've heard several different things, but I don't feel comfortable just blurting out stuff as if I know it, because I don't. And I haven't seen enough science to make me believe. I certainly heard a lot, but I can't get into passing along in quotes, a science rumor. We don't want science rumors. We want real science. Yes.
A comment on energetics and then a comment on the leaves. Somebody else also is experiencing a warming, sort of cleansing and rejuvenating feel. And somebody else observes the dry leaves appear like tweed, brown, black, gold, red gold woven together.
Love both the comments. So the latter comment was the leaves appear like tweed. And I kind of like this, and I'm probably going to borrow and not give credit to you later on when I talk about this, that this is such a good comment, because you've got the golds, the browns, the blacks, all woven nicely, beautifully into a pattern. And actually, let me comment a little further on this, because some of the cakes, when you open them up, even though they're not wet, they have more of that tweedy type of interaction going on. So great catch on the aesthetics. The first comment again, I'm sorry.
Was about this sense of rejuvenation and in addition to the warmth from the liquor.
Yeah, this commentator talks about a feeling of rejuvenation in addition to warmth from the liquor. And I like this a lot because, you know, when I am in Yunnan, it feels always very comfortable to drink this tea. And certainly for that environment, it is a great tea to drink. And the rejuvenation aspect I get out of that, and certainly the warming. And I told you, for me, right away, I got a warming sensation from this tea. And it's a comfortable. It's not like I'm flushing or sweating profusely. None of that. It was unlike some red teas. So some of the ancient tree red tea sometimes can almost make me feel like, oh my gosh, I'm walking fast, when in fact I'm just standing here. But not this. This was just a pleasant warmth, not excessive in any way, completely comforting. And I go back to that comment about taking a brisk walk in a forest, in a sunny forest. And you got that, except I'm not doing brisk enough to sweat.
Somebody is experiencing the tea seeming more viscous and astringent as it cools.
Okay, so this comment is about more, a commentator is experiencing the tea as more viscous and astringent as it cools. Let me check on the astringency for me. The viscous, I understand. As these teas cool, I catch that viscousness.
And somebody else is finding that it has become sweeter as it's cooled, but with a consistency, at least in his experience on astringency.
You know, it turns out I like both these comments. I didn't initially think I was going to like the astringency comment, but I do like it. It is more drying on the tongue. And I really right away got the sweet comment because as this cools down, I think it's just like with a oolong, your taste buds, as they adjust to the heat and as it cools down, different ones fire and you get different sensations. And I'm sure that that's also true for these teas, although the range of sensations isn't usually the same range as it is for cliff teas.
Spring pick, bud and 2 leaves?
No, this is not a spring. It is a spring pick, but it's not a bud and 2 leaves. It's picked down to the 4th leaf. And it's also a blend of leaves from the same mountain. So it's not a blend of leaves from various places. It's all from Linsong and it's all from the same mountain area. In other words, within 1 square mile, that's a radius. That's where these leaves come from.
Ancient trees or bushes?
No, these are not ancient trees. These are bushes. These are bushes that are a little bit older. They're not old bushes either. They're probably 50, 60 years old, but they are not, they're not ancient, they're not old, but they're very smooth.
Energetically, I feel as if it awakens some senses, cleared the cobwebs. Most of all, it's just really comforting to my previously roiled tongue.
Oh, I love this comment. So this tea for this commentator, it has awakened cleared out the cobwebs and it just made the stomach very comfortable. It's a comforting feeling, both mentally bringing you to the table as well as physically making you just feel comfortable.
How long has this tea been aged?
We have aged this. Hey, 小北，我们是13年抓这个，对不对？ Yeah. Okay. We've aged this about 9 years, and therefore we've noticed the changes. And this comes from a very, very good factory in Linsong. All right. Let's see how we're doing. Well, we're doing great. I didn't walk you all the way through the process. So use this remaining time to walk you all the way through the fully fermented process. So I got you through the first 5 or 6 steps where the tea is sun-dried, and then if it's going to be fully fermented, it's sent to a larger processing plant, and they usually will blend the teas. And what they do is they have a process called piling. So basically, you wet the leaves, you put it on, you pile it usually around 3 to 4 feet high. You cover it, you wet them, you cover them with a thermal blanket, and you let the temperature get up to about 125 degrees. And at that point, you usually take that thermal blanket off, mix the leaves again, air all the leaves, because you're really not trying to, if you leave them all under that thermal blanket and it gets hotter and hotter, you'll wreck the batch. And these batches, I sent you pictures of the rooms. The rooms are enormous rooms. And these are pictures from the 2nd largest factory in China. And so you can imagine when it's full like that, the aroma you can smell from a long ways away. And it's just really rich and interesting. Yes?
No minerality in this tea, but hints are there. So I guess a teeny weeny bit of minerality is one comment. And somebody else asked, does the area in which the tea is fermented, the surrounding flora, affect the final flavor of the tea because of fermentation?
This is a really, really good question. And this is a complicated question, but I can simplify this to a degree. So the questioner asked, does the area, the surrounding area from where the leaves come from, influence what microbial agents are actually working on the tea leaves? And let me go one step further, because there's an implication in this question. And I'll address this implication right away. Are all puerhs, are all fully fermented teas, do they all have the same microbial outlook? In other words, it's the same microbes working on all the puerh teas? So that one is easy. The answer is no. Each of the teas, it depends on a couple things which microbes become dominant. Now, you're going to hear almost one microbe almost all the time talked about. That's called Niger aspergillus. There are a couple other which frequently, but not always, are part of the background of a tea, of a puerh tea. So environment does matter, but this is further tricked up because when you go to a large factory, they sometimes use techniques to inoculate the tea, much like you use a SCOBY for kombucha or a sourdough starter for sourdough bread. Each starter is going to predict or cause the end result to be a certain way, right? Well, how do they do that with puerh tea? One easy way is to use the slurry, that is the watery runoff. When a pile is being watered, there's always some runoff, is to use that and put that on a new set of leaves that you pile. That's one way to inoculate, and some factories do that. Another way is, I told you that they cover it with this thermal blanket. They get up to about 120, 125 degrees, then take the blanket off, use pitchforks or whatever they're using, shovels, I guess, to mix, remix, cool down, and then put a little bit more water on, boink, put the blanket over. And they have alarms, by the way, on this too. So they've got a temperature gauge in there. These factories are very modern. They got temperature gauge. When it gets to that desired temperature, the alarm goes off, and then everybody rushes over, takes the blanket off, and it does this turning of the tea leaves. And this goes on for 45 to 60 days. It goes on strongly for 35 days. The last 10 days, they start to bring the temperature down. So at the bottom of those piles, there's some tea leaves which clump together, and they call those calll, so tea heads, so to speak. And they can use those to inoculate new batches. That's another way that they can do it. And then lastly, they can take some leaves from a finished batch and put them in with a brand new batch. So there are a bunch of ways to do it. The slurry way is quite often used because that's easiest, but also the calll, the tea head, the hardened tea is also used to do that. So now that's a complication, isn't it? Because if you're at the farm and you're in the 30 to 70 year, you're relying on the environment at the farm, the forest environment, the original environment that the leaves grew up in. Once you go to a factory, you are relying on what the factory does in order to get the process sped up and completed.
Anything else to share on Aspergillus niger?
So I have a funny story to share on Aspergillus niger. We have a customer who came in one day and said, "Oh, I make craft beer. I love making craft beer. And I always need some sort of starter. Do you think I should be able to use your black tea as a starter?" And I thought about it for a minute. I said, maybe. So sold him enough to use that as a starter. And he did. And that thing became so frothy, so fast, that this person was afraid because not used to seeing this sort of reaction. And so actually, and he's in the pharmaceutical industry, so he was really afraid. So he had one of his colleagues analyze it and said, "I don't know whether you should actually use this or not." So in tea, it works fine for the puerh tea. I don't know whether, again, one should be using that as a starter in anything else. It's certainly very active. And again, the magic of puerh tea and whatever is contributing to its benefits, it's the same as trying to isolate, the same thing that nutraceuticals try and do in order to make a big profit. Try and isolate a compound instead of thinking of the organic whole. Because remember, I named Aspergillus niger, but I also have read and know that there are 10 to 12 other microbes that can be prominent in the tea. So the answer is no on Aspergillus niger. There is one other thing I can tell you, and that is I included yeast and molds. So those things are all true. They're all working on the tea leaves. However, from a flavor perspective, if you want better tasting artificially fermented tea, you better have fewer molds and more yeast. Because I saw an article just last year talking about when you get more yeast at work, you get a much better flavor. More molds at work, not as good. All right, I think, did I finish? Oh, I almost finished. My watch says that I finished 5 minutes ago. Let me do one more wrap up and then I'll truly be finished. So they do this process for 35, 45, 55 days. At the conclusion of it, they've got a decision. They're either going to leave it loose leaf like Celestial Offering, or they're going to compress it, steam it, and produce it as a cake. If they do that, it won't be ready for another 3 months after that. So it really is taking 4 to 5 months to produce this. They dry them usually in a place which has a fan going all the time. You can't just leave them. You certainly can't leave them in the sun. So they have all these methodologies to get them dried properly. The other thing is, and why Celestial Offering is so interesting, is it's loose leaf. You don't have to worry about any codes. You know, usually when you get the tea cakes, the fully artificially fermented tea cakes, they're codes. And those codes tell you whether this is real or it's an LCS version. There's lots of information in those codes. There's also paper inside which tells you whether, gives you some sense of the exact factory, other information about the tea. You don't have to worry about that with the Celestial Offering. It's loose leaf. It is a blend within 1 square mile of radius. They use fine technique to get the leaves uniform, really good, easy, and at the cost end of things, this is a much less expensive way to consume puerh than the cakes. The cakes are really, many of those, especially the fine cakes or ancient tree cakes, those things are expensive. Yeah.
What does the LCS stand for?
Oh, liars, cheaters, and scammers. So the Chinese have an app, and this app, once you put in all these codes that are on this piece of paper, will tell you if it had a possibility of really coming from where people claim. And over the years, you've had liars, cheaters, and scammers make a great deal of money by saying, you know, this comes from this place, it's 50 years old or it's 30 years old. And nowadays, all the tea experts have to do is enter these numbers in, and they know, oh, came from this factory. And it's actually 2019, not 1975, as you thought. So that's been a big improvement in terms of controlling that segment of the market. All right, this was a really interesting session for us to go through. There's a ton of information about fully fermented teas, but at least you have a good outline after today. And you also have some outline of the process to actually get to this endpoint. You get to taste a really nice one of these. And this is from a quality perspective. This in China is considered very fine for what it costs. All right. Next week, we have Golden Sweetness, which is a red tea. Looking forward to talking with all of you about that, because that's a red tea from Fujian province. We all know from the sessions we've had in the past that those are more finely crafted. So this week, your responsibility is as best as possible to stay healthy. And we look forward to seeing you next week. You take care now. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.